going 4-1. Aaron with Cruel Boys of all things, going 4-1. Also, Aaron is a complete stallion. Like, if there was ever a poster child for what Age of Sigmar should look like, it's fucking Aaron. Noah Quino, Lumineth Realm Lords. Gregory Brewer with Bone Splitters. Matt the Nugent, with his Beast of Chaos. Fucking Nuge. Let's go. Kyle Callip with Nighthorn, and then
Is that the start of the video right here? Right. So,
I'm pretty
hi.
sure.
Oh, me and Kyle are here to talk about our lists and games and experience in general at Smite Club Open in Arizona last weekend. We trekked in a van of, well, a total of 8 people in Airbnb, went to Smite Club Open, and our team got 8 out of 10 of the top spots. Let's go. Me and Kyle both went 4-1 with some losses that were basically minors, so we very close to 5-0 each as well. I think our lists are pretty interesting, so I guess we're gonna talk over those. So this is, if you guys don't know, this is Kyle. Say hi, Kyle. Hi, everybody.
I'm still a little sick from partying too hard in Arizona, so like, if I mute myself to cough or something, there's a heads up.
All right. So yeah, if we go to Arizona, this is not our first time going to Arizona. We have like a whole thing where some of them come over to our SoCal events, and then we go back to Arizona and kind of build the community up. But it was 48 people, and there was some very, very good players there for sure. And 5 rounds as usual. A little bit of a weird pack, but it's really informed a lot. So I guess we can kind of just jump into it in terms of going over some of our lists and like the tag and why we went with choices that we went with. So
Or we could talk also about the, I mean, maybe we should say what the pack was exactly. Talk about the, I guess which set of rules it was using. I think we were using sort of the correct pack, COREC.
the correct pack, yeah.
But like also not, because it was weird. It was very different. So I'm gonna go start with that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so I guess now we brought it in, we got to talk about why it was weird. So, number one, the tournament starts off with the mighty and the cunning, which is just it's a battle plan. Let's just put it that way. It's the one where basically every time you kill a GV unit, Galician veteran, on a objective, you get 3 points, 3 victory points, which basically means if you bring a lot of GVs, you just lose round 1 automatically, unfortunately. But that was really interesting. Sort of. I mean, like there's wiggle room and there's other stuff to it, but like, and then also lets you use the proving grounds repeatedly on the same objective, which is actually why I went with the army I did go with. It definitely informed that, and I think it informed a lot of people's lists going into this event. So some of the armies were kind of not what you'd expect, but they worked really well for the pack, and I think that's a really interesting part of being a player. How did you feel about that mission specifically?
So I got paired into quad tree lords, and then I got to play Sylvaneth, who had the only other battle line they had was the tree evidence. So I didn't get any points from like I couldn't kill the dudes, and yeah, the whole like you get 1 extra point if you die on the objective. They only get 2 points if you die off of it. So I was like, well, like you said, I think before we started the game, it was almost better just to not stand on the objective at all with your GV and then just like give up the point. I accidentally ended up redeploying onto the objective in our game, and I was like, oh shoot, he's gonna kill me. And then that 1 point difference almost lost me it. So it is kind of scary.
It's a stressful mission, yeah. That mission basically, I was gonna play Big Wa because I'm the Big Wa guy, but you can't really play Big Wa without throwing GV units into fights that they don't necessarily win. So I was like, if I play Big Wa, I'm just gonna lose by like 12 points. Like I can't play that, so I had to play Girl Boys, but ended up being a pretty good choice apparently. So Yeah, and then the other interesting thing about the missions and stuff is that we were playing with battle points, which normally in SoCal we don't play with battle points. We have a different system that I personally think works better, especially with this. But it is definitely a change, and made for some interesting like decision points throughout the tournament as well. Just trying to score maximum points so you can go up higher on the standings and stuff like that. So but the rest of the missions were fairly standard, the normal stuff you'd see.
So let's just
Yeah,
go
so that,
through them real quick, I suppose. So the first one was
yeah,
Eye and Cunning. The second one was as a Galette, which is a 5 objective one.
yeah.
Um,
And then
head
round 3
no
was head-on
head
collision.
on head on collision.
Yeah,
Round
it's
4.
another really challenging mission.
Yes, it's weird. It's a lot more. It's definitely weird. 4 being the hardest one, so it's still nest. What do you call it?
Silk Steel Net. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
still nest. And
and
then
then
finally, Nidus Paths, which
Nidus
I
Path. Yeah.
actually used the Nidus Path 3 times for the first time. I think I figured it out. Like I think I know how like when you're supposed to use it now, or I'm not sure. It just
I've still never ended up using it because every time I play, people just screen them out and they're unavailable the whole game. So I'm like, okay, well,
it's
apparently not.
actually so it's not the one you care about. It's not the one in your back and their back. It's actually the ones on the alternate corners. So yeah, I guess we can go to that when we get to that one.
Yeah,
But
we get that. Yeah, I fought Iron
uh,
Jaws and he had them all covered. So yeah, it wasn't
I
gonna
had
happen.
Seraphon. So the they were a little slower than I was, but like in doing so, like I could bait them to one side and kind of redeploy my army to the other side using the Nidus path. So it was interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
I think in general this GHB has a lot of really interesting missions, and except for like literally the only one that I think is like is Mighty and the Cunning, where it's like I probably wouldn't recommend putting that in the back because it's so lopsided, but just not well
that on
balanced.
top of the battle pack, the battle points thing, where it's like, oh,
Yeah,
if I
where
score
people are scoring
100
100
points,
points, and
yeah,
I'm like my max out score is 75, and they're getting 100 points. It's like, oh, I guess I
yeah, they're
can't.
like 25
I'm not
points up.
yeah, it's starting. But anyway, it was still cool, and I ended up getting fourth place anyway, and we're both in the top 8. And so it's like, did it really make that much of a difference? Probably not. If there was like 100+ players, then it'd probably be pretty important.
You could
So another
say that like the fact that it was like that because I was actually on the bottom of the points bracket the entire tournament, right? Like even though I was
yeah,
like winning games, but it was like, well, I never had to worry about matching into certain people because I was kind of at the bottom. Though it was still random, it was like the likelihood of me having to face um Tom Guan's list was not very high, especially going into um the second day.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it was
definitely.
it does make a difference. It does make a difference.
All right, so I think now that we've talked about the missions, 'cause it is important for discussing our list because it did inform for sure my choices. I don't know if it did too much for you, but probably at least a little bit. So I think I'm going to kind of introduce your list a little bit because I want to point out some stuff. So Night Haunt, very popular army right now, but I would say that the least played sub faction is probably the Emerald Host, which is who you were playing. Which makes it pretty interesting. And your list is also very unique. I've never seen anyone else's list that's structured the way yours is. So I wanted to kind of introduce it like that, and for you to talk about sort of why you chose the Emerald Host, why you have a lot of these really unique choices in your list. So go ahead and start us off here.
Sure. I gotta pull up my list again. I mean, I know what it is, but it's best to like go from top down.
Gotta keep it
I
accurate.
would actually say that the one that's no retreat is probably the least taken one. Um,
Oh, really?
yeah, I don't. I think I've seen one list in the entirety of like since that book came out. You have to have 10 or more models, and as soon as you lose one model, then the subfaction goes away.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that. But I know. Ranya plays that faction, but yeah.
it's a. Oh well, I guess that's a pretty good player. But I mean, aside from that one person, I guess, like I don't think I've seen anybody else try to run that list. But anyway, so for my list here, I like heroes. The I play a lot of KO, so when you're playing KO, you tend to have heroes for the artifacts because they're good. So
Yeah.
hopping from KO and Fire Slayers, which are both hero centric, to Night Haunt, and then realizing that Night Haunt heroes are just better. Like they're just
Yeah.
they're everything that you want them to be. They provide support. They have the ethereal. They get the bodyguard, and they hit really hard. And finally,
Yeah.
uh, bounty hunters doesn't get bonuses damage against them. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of situations, like especially against things like Feck or something, where I'll park my heroes in front of my line and say, okay, well, if you want to come into me, when you have -2, even -3 damage, because they're not counting the bounty hunter damage anymore compared to the
Yeah.
rest of the list. Um, that's
Yeah.
like
Just not doing anything. Just bouncing
yeah,
right off.
and it's all of them are like Ren 1 or 2, Kratos being Ren 3 and damage 2 each. Um,
They can
so
actually slap pretty hard there.
yeah, most of the time I find that with this army in particular, like as a player, you never want to die in your opponent's turn, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna go into
Ideally.
combat, you always want to trade up. Um,
Yeah.
well, when you're playing against like my army and I'm like standing right behind my screen and all my heroes are there and they hit the screen and then they don't kill anything and then my heroes have a 2-inch reach and they're hitting over the screen. Um, and I'm killing them on their turn, right? And now they're all standing
Yeah.
in front of me, and then so it's really easy to just kind of like get a lot of forward damage on their kind of like the same way that like I would play KO in the sense where like most of my damage comes from their charge phase where I shoot them in the unleash or unleash hell.
Only shell.
Uh,
Yeah. And like final whisper and stuff or whatever it's called. Yeah.
yeah. So there's that. There's the fact that everything in the army, well, all the heroes hit on 3s and 3s naturally. So the +1 to hit and wound means that everything hits on 2s and 2s. So it's like playing about as elite as an army as you can get. And
Yeah.
then coupled with the fact that so this is kind of stealing from 40k, but everybody hates Terminators, right? Like Terminators in
They're
40k right now.
fucking impossible to kill. Yeah.
Yeah, Terminators have 3 wounds each, have a 4-up invuln save, which is like ethereal, and it cannot be wounded on anything less than 4s because of transhuman, right?
Yeah.
What has the exact same stat line? Spirit hosts. Spirit hosts have the exact
Oh,
same stat line with a corpse cart, because most things in the game wound on 3s. Then when you have a -1 to wound, they wound on 4s. They have 3 wounds each and they're ethereal. Then you have the stacking -1s to damage. Then you just have something like that's mathematically incredibly hard to kill.
yeah. Yeah. That's actually really tough because like 3 spirit hosts is 9 wounds, 4 up save they can't rend, -1 to wound. They have 6-step ward, and they're regenerating and healing and stuff like that. So it's really, really hard to get rid of those guys.
Yep. And then if the heroes are in front, and because I play 2 different spirit hosts, um, when you're passing off wounds, you're passing off 1 wound at a time. You have to do that technically because if you rolled all your dice, and you could technically overkill the unit, you wouldn't know which unit you were going to. So
Yeah.
when you're slow rolling, you can actually apply the wounds to 2 different units. So you have like you could go from 1 unit all the way down to 1 wound left, then swap to the other unit, go down to 1 wound left.
Oh my god, that's
Um,
annoying.
it is, and so you're down to 2. You have 2 models, but they're both on 1 wound, so you're actually as if you had not taken that extra 4 damage. Um, and then on top of the fact that the heroes have bravery 10 and heroic recovery is almost guaranteed. So this actually kind of happened when I was getting a staring contest with Greg's what do you call it, Wardock.
Wargok?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was doing that in his hero phase against my Cruciator because he had to kill it so he could do damage.
Yeah.
So he's playing that game and he kills 2 spirit hosts and does 2 wounds to the last one. So he'd done 8 damage to my hero. Sorry, he'd done like 10, 8 of which had passed off to the spirit hosts, and then the hero had taken like 5 actually. I was down to 1 wound on both. And then at the end of that, it was now my heroic action. I healed 3. I rallied to bring back a whole spirit host back. And so suddenly I negated 7 that damage.
Oh yeah. See, that's like, I'm surprised that you're not playing the Lady of Grief because this list is sadness. Like,
I mean, like I started with her, but like she was the exact same points as a unit of banshees and um uh another cruciator, right? Like the amount of the amount of damage 4 banshees do is just astronomically
they do
higher than.
they do hit weirdly hard. It's like, damn, I did not expect that. The first time I got charged with them, I was like, oh, thought these were like little support pieces. Apparently not. Um,
That's
slap me
that's
hard.
a very unassuming like idea that most people have. Is that they look at it and go, okay, well, what's the primary um thing to worry about here? Well, it's probably Kurdos. Well, Kurdos is the hardest thing to kill in the entire army because of the amount of wounds that he passes off. And he's got 7 wounds, and I'll throw some
Yeah.
buffs on him. But you should also probably kill the chain grasp so that you can actually score points. But you should also maybe kill the chain gas so that I can not have +1 to wound. But you should also probably like
Yeah, you're
everything
like
is like,
stuck.
well,
And you're like, I should probably get all these, but then on top of all that, you also can't manage to kill any of them. So it's kind of just
yeah.
like fuck.
Then if I lose one of them, like okay, so at the end of again, I have a lot of people who go for the corpse cart. Okay, cool. You spent a whole turn, you killed the corpse cart, or you shot me with like Marathi or Valarial. A spear kills the corpse cart. Okay, well that was like 700 points of shooting you just used to kill a corpse cart.
Which is like what, like 80 points, I think, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's like so
That, but they
I'm
have to
glad
kill it because if they
you have to.
don't, like,
So it's just everything in this list. I tend to have it where like my opponent will kill, to get around to killing like 3 or 4 units, and they'll look at my army and there'll be like 10 models left on the board. And they'll be like, "Hey, so you'll concede, right? Like I probably got you beat." And I'm like, "I don't think you realize that I still have like 75% of my list here. Like, like they're all still there.
every time I walked by your table, I saw that you had like barely any models up, but Kyle's losing, and you were just like, and I was looking, you just like wipe them off the table after that. And I'm like, oh, didn't think that was gonna happen. Because it's deceiving when you look at your list, especially when you put it on the table. It just doesn't look that scary, and then it just wins, and you're like, oh shit, that was. It doesn't work the way you expect when you look at the list, I think.
Yeah. And there's definitely a lot going on. Like I could talk about it forever. It's like banshees, double unbinds, basically negating Seraphon and Zinch is something that I'm worried about. 2 Cruciators pretty much negates the entirety of destruction, outside of I suppose
Yeah,
Cruel Boy's shooting. Um, Corpse Cart plus um, again 2 Cruciators kind of like stops God Beasts from being scary to me. Like
yeah. Like, what are they
Kragnos,
going to minus one to
Carnute.
wound and -2 damage? Like, they just don't do anything. They're like at like a quarter effectiveness in terms of damage, and then their rend doesn't matter either. So it's just like, Kragnos doesn't seems like it would just hit you like a pile of tissue paper,
Yep.
compared to what he normally does.
And then he's standing there, and it's like, okay, well, I'll just back up my whole army, and I've got 15 charges, and I'm gonna stack that -1 to save. Um,
And you're just
I'll
gonna go
pop
down.
that +1 to +1 attacks for all my units, and like when you have. Oh, so one more thing that is something that's worth noting is the fact that the amount of real estate taken up by each of the heroes for the amount of damage that they do around a single base is actually like it's something to think about, right? Like it's a um if I can only get X amount of models around Kragnos' base, then I better hope that all of those models are going to hit really hard,
Yeah,
which is what
yeah,
happens, right?
that's actually a really good point. I didn't think about that. So what you're saying is that basically because their bases are small, but they have a surprising amount of tankiness and a surprisingly high damage output, you can basically fit like over 1,000 points around someone's base worth of damage.
And
It,
debuffs. It's also like
yeah,
so again the I hit -8 rend on Techless. You know, like oh let me just hit you with all of these different
oh my god, -8. That's got to be like a record. Like that's ridiculous.
it was 5 with 3 from Kurdos, right? But like you know, he had
Yeah,
Finest Hour, Mystic Shield, Aether Quartz, all out defense. Uh I think that's the extent. He had +4 to save, right? Well, it didn't matter because I still had -8, right? So,
oh my
so
god, that
like
would have been so salty.
you know, you throw
Yeah,
cogs there, and I'm just gonna like re-roll these charges, and like I'm just fishing for anything that's higher than an 8. Doesn't matter if that one hero doesn't get in because everything else is gonna
yeah.
go. So
So
there's a lot of thought to it. Uh,
yeah, and so why did you choose the Emerald Host as opposed to some other choices that might have been available?
so the Scarlet Doom, I tried once. I did really. I think I got 4th at Boise, with it. But like, if you think about it, I am paying the opportunity cost of an entire subfaction buff 350 points in my army.
Yeah,
It's like, well, I actually really hate a lot of these subfact. I mean, you know, they kind of they lean towards spamming of something. Um,
yeah,
Quicksilver Dead's the same idea. Like, well, if you're not running Harridans, like I could run 20 of them, but like if I'm raising my entire subfaction bonus, buff 1 unit, why bother? Um,
yeah,
and the reason, the actual real reason I really like going back to Emerald Host is, um, has to do with kind of CP negation as well as like putting a passive amount of pressure on the back of your opponent's minds. Like if you're sitting in the back and you're playing against Seraphon, especially in second edition, not so much in this edition, but the simple threat of Comet's Call means that you have to push forward, right?
yeah. So
Um,
so basically, because they're constantly getting ticked down by your Emerald Host abilities, they're pressured into coming into you, which is exactly what you want.
yeah, because I can't actually push forward with this sort of list, especially with how slow the corpse cart moves. But like if you think about how artillery is used in video games, like specifically either Total War or even just thinking about OBR in this game, OBR doesn't want to go forward, or in Total War you just want to like apply pressure to with an artillery piece so that your opponent comes to you. So like if they're sitting back, you just kind of go, okay, well I guess you'll just you know that nice skink priest you have in the back there is going to be dead by turn 3. Um, or like a blood secretor, like it doesn't matter if it has a 3-up save, it's going to be gone by turn 3 probably. So if they're not
Yeah,
pushing their advantage, they're not coming into me, then all their support pieces are going to be gone, and I don't have to do anything. Now on top of that, um, Kurdos steals a CP on a 4-up or a 5-up at the beginning of each battle round. Um, Lydia Linder can stop you from using CP on a 5-up. She's not on the list today, but she used to be. And then you think about the fact that anytime someone uses heroic recovery, that's actually an opportunity cost, basically costs a CP. So if you want to use
yeah.
heroic recovery, that's essentially the same as using a CP to heal yourself.
Like on a 4-up
So
moving CP sort of thing. Yeah, it's like
yeah,
which is something that I deal with Big Wall all the time. Having to roll for the wall points with my heroic action. I don't get to do the CP ability. I'm not using heroic healing either. So I definitely know what that feels like on the other side. It's something I have to deal with a lot because my main army that I play. So like it's a subtle thing, but it definitely adds up to these like disadvantages and making it very hard to make the plays you want to make and making your army less consistent, less ability to react. So it's a subtle thing, but it definitely makes an impact.
yeah. So and that's the extent of everything in this list. You know, like it's just one more thing that's like oh, I have to deal with this thing too. The only problem is that it takes me 30 minutes to explain all my rules before each game. So it's like, by the way, I've got 15 different war scrolls. They all do something different, and when you know,
And
uh,
then you're also rolling tons of dice, tons of saves, things coming back, passing off wounds, lots of MSU. So it's definitely a time-consuming army to play.
it is, and it's I'm also like abusing a lot of rules that people don't usually see, like cohesion rules, garrison rules, uh, combat activation order rules, stuff like that. So
Okay,
there is a lot.
so
There's a lot.
there's a lot to it. And one last thing I'd like to touch on before we move forward is there anything you would change about the list moving forward?
When we move away from bounty hunters, Cruel Gas is gonna leave and come back. We're gonna bring back probably um or another caster. Especially if Arcane Tome goes away, having Reconor or something like that is important. We do need the
Yeah,
two casts.
which I do hope they remove Arcane Tome because it's just too good. Like,
Yeah, when you
not,
mentioned it on the way home, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. It is a very good, very very good artifact. Um,
yeah,
and
it's
then
better
actually
than
one
like
other thing.
99% of the book ones. It's good, better than all the general ones as well by a wide margin. That's why it's in almost every single list for every single army. That's how you know it's a problem. Kind of like the Amulet of Destiny, where when it was a 5-up, it was like this is just too strong. Like,
Yep. And then like you look at some of the artifacts in normal books, it's like once per game cast one spell from your spell lore,
yeah,
which would in any other situation would have been awesome. But like compared to Arcane Tome, you're just like, well,
compared to
this is
Arcane
so much
Tome, it's
better.
like this just sucks. Yeah, because Arcane Tome is nuts. So hopefully that gets nixed out. And judging by some of the stuff we've seen in other books, he probably will. But because like the Skaven one, for example, as Master of Magic, is exactly the same as the one in the General's Handbook, and you're like, that means it's probably going away in the General Handbook. But
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, that's your list. And you went 4-1, and we could go briefly over matchups a little bit towards the end, but we're gonna mostly move forward fairly quickly. So I'm gonna talk about my list here. I play Cruel Boys. It's my second 4-1 with Cruel Boys. They are challenging, but I find them fun. So my list is Big Yellers. Now, I've been playing Grin and Blades since the book came out, and it's funny because Grin and Blades just got buffed, but Bounty Hunters makes Grin and Blades unplayable. Like I wouldn't even play them in RTT because they're just going to get tabled immediately. Um, so like gut rippers are just worthless, unfortunately, right now because bounty hunters. So I decided to go with Big Yellers, which is the sub faction most people take is the shooting sub faction. And the reason I went with Cruel Boys and specifically Big Yellers is because my GV are Bolt Boys. And on that first mission, I figure, well, if you're killing my Bolt Boys, I probably already lost anyway. So, like, it's kind of a, I don't lose more situation, which is like not a big deal. Whereas if I'm winning, you're not going to get to my Bolt Boys. So, it was pretty safe for that first mission, and it ended up being good. They ended up being good on every single mission, as it turns out. They're real good in this battle pack. So my list is I have a Corpse Ripper Vulture as my general. He's got a Super Sneaky, which is redeploying a unit. Arcane Tome, which is funny they brought the Arcane Tome because I actually brought it because I thought you had to be a wizard to bond to the Kron Spine. Spoiler alert. Turns out you don't. And for some reason, I thought that was the case. I don't know why, but it was pretty good anyway. So I'm going to keep it that way. And he's got the anti-ward save spell, Nasty Hex, just in case.
Did you
It's
ever
really
end up
just in case I
casting it?
fight. No, but that's because of who I fought. I didn't need it. I didn't fight
Yeah.
ward saves. Um, but if I'd fought like Nurgle, for example, it's really nice to be like, all right, these flies are in my face. Well, I'm going to clear them out now, and actually get out of this trap quick enough. So I figured it was worth it versus like Mork's Eye Pebble versus shooting, which would have been better in this tournament because of who I fought. But
Did you play against shooting?
so
I actually didn't see any.
I did. Round one, I fought KO, and I won, but it was annoying. and then I fought Sylvanet that had shooting in it, and then yeah, I think it's all the shooting I fought, right? Yeah, but still, it would have been better with more side pebble this tournament, but I still would take the Arcane Tome. And then my other character, just a regular Mire Brute. He's just a beat stick. He's there to counterpunch and deal with smaller problems on the table. Like when things kind of get out of my control, he's there to go clean up a problem. And then I have the Kron Spine because the Kron Spine is busted. And if you're playing a weak army that is struggling to win, try throwing a Kron Spine in there. It's about the same power level as like the more powerful armies are, but it really gives you a fighting chance with some of these less powerful armies. And there's giving the +1 to cast and dispel is also helpful for like my Arcane Tome stuff. And I'll get more into the strategy with him in a bit. And then I have 2 units of 9 Bolt Boys, 3 Bolt Boys, and 4 units of Hobgrots, which is a lot more than most people play. So
Is it 10 models each?
10 models each, so it's 40 Hobgrots on the table.
And they're not
they're not GVs, which is very important for this tournament. Although I would play them in pretty much any Big Yellers list, period. But it was especially important in this one. I was like, I can't run Gut Rippas. Like, I'm just going to lose the round one. And Gut Rippas are kind of bad anyway, but they're sometimes necessary. So I think this list is fantastic. I wouldn't change a single thing other than slightly rearranging who's in which battalion. It's double battle regiment, just because it makes deployment easier when things are arranged a certain way. But that's literally all I would change. I feel like it's probably as powerful as Cruel Boys can get with the current rules. And it definitely felt that way. Like, normally when I'm playing Cruel Boys, and I've played 5 GTs as Cruel Boys, and like 4 or 5 RTTs as well. And this is the only time where I was playing a list where I didn't feel like I was fighting an uphill battle. Where I didn't feel like I had to play my ass off to even like barely win a game. It was like my list actually felt strong. And that's a good feeling to have when you're used to playing Cruel Boys. So for all you Cruel Boys players out there, I highly recommend trying out this list. So what makes it so good is basically, like, when you play an army that's struggling, you have to be honest with yourself about what that army's weak points are. And Cruel Boys are fragile, pricey, immobile, and they have no anchor. They have nothing that can lock people down. So, what's not fragile and is an anchor is the Kron Spine. And it also will kill monsters, which is nice. But, like, basically it's just there to clog things up and buy you a lot of time. Every extra turn you're shooting with your crossbows before they get to do something is like huge, because there's 21 Bolt Boys in this list. So like one turn of shooting is like 2 entire units off the enemy's army gone. Just and then it becomes damn near impossible to get to me. If I get to shoot you twice before you even get into my screens meaningfully, like you've lost pretty much. So there's also the 4 units of Hobgrot. So I have the Kron Spine, who's kind of like a long-term screen in a way. Like, he gets in their face, he holds people down. He's not really there to kill the opponents. I mean, he does damage. He kills stuff, but he's not actually that high damage. He just holds people in place. And there's 4 units of Hobgrots is basically 2 layers of screens. It's not like all over the table, not really being aggressive. They're just getting in the way. And I try and space them out, so you only fight 10 Hobgrots at a time. You charge the Hobgrots, you killed 10 of them. Oh no, 80 points. And I get another turn of shooting you. And then the Corpse Ripper Volcha with 2 units and 9 Bolt Boys, I can double Overwatch or Unleash Hell people. So you're like, okay, I killed the Kron Spine, I got through all 4 units of screens, and now I'm going to charge these Bolt Boys and get double Unleash Held and take 20 mortal wounds on the charge. And so you're just like, you just can't do it. If you're a melee army, you do not stand a chance. Like, when I fought Soulblight Gravelords, he didn't kill a single model in my army. I tabled him without him killing a single model. And he didn't kill a single Hobgrot because I just kept redeploying away from him. And then he would like make it, go for a charge, and I'm like, kill him on Unleash Hell with this before he kills my screens, and like it was just brutal. Absolutely brutal. And when I fought Iron Jaws, he killed a grand total of 160 points. He killed 2 units of Hobgrots before he got tabled.
Do you feel that you have enough CP? Like you don't need a Warlord battalion at all?
You would want a Warlord battalion, but Cruel Boys need to decide who goes first. Because of the way their abilities work, if you don't have the choice, you're at such a huge disadvantage. Because like Super Sneaky is a redeploy before the game begins, before you decide who goes first.
Gotcha.
So if you don't get to pick, and you redeploy your aggressive unit forward, and then they're like, "Okay, I'll take first turn and just kill it," and you're like, "Fuck." That's rough. And then they're so immobile that like if I don't get to choose who goes first and I deploy kinda safe-ish, I can't walk forward and shoot you.
Yeah,
so it's really, really important. So I wish I could get more CP. I'm doing heroic leadership every single turn. I'm just like hoping, because that is one of the weaker points of the list is it's CP hungry and has no extra CP. And so you will be running out of CP every turn. There are some things that help with that, like the Killaboss standing next to your bolt boys and like shooting your bolt boys, and you're like, oh, I gotta do heroic leadership. Well, Killaboss makes it so only one runs away max. So it's like, I'll just let one run because I need the CP for other things.
Oh, that's a good point. I was gonna ask if like he's also there to stop it. You can spying presence both of them, right? Or no?
He can do both, but it's just standing next to them. He already does it basically. It's just only a max of one runs away with any of the killer bosses. So it's on Gut Rippers. I never felt it was important because they're in melee. Like if they're dying, they're dying. Like they're not as critical. So people are always like, oh, what about if your Gut Rippers run away? I'm like, they're just 2-turn screens instead of 1-turn screens anyway. So it's not a big deal. Whereas Bolt Boys running away it'll lose you the game if they all run away.
Yeah.
So
that's what I was kind of thinking. I didn't even. I was like, okay, how would I play into this? Like, oh, I'd probably try to ping some damage onto the bolt boys and hope they just kind of ran. But if big boy on the bird sitting there can't do that.
Yeah, and I only have 2 characters, so you can't really. And the Mire Brute automatically heals himself every turn for D3, and you're not really killing the Vulture fast enough. So I think it's like pretty hard for you to engage with that, and that's what a lot of people were encountering. Is that it's a pretty hard nut to crack. It doesn't look like that much, and then you play against it, and it's just you're locked down. Like, there's some other one other choice I want to talk about in the list, and I've been ranting about this for like a year and a half almost now, or a full year at least. No Swamp Kala Shamans. Swamp Kala Shamans suck. Don't play them. They're terrible. They look good on paper until you actually like really sit down and think about it. And you're like, well, they're a caster. No, they're not. They can't cast because they have to poison. So they're not a caster. They just have a single disc spell. Secondly, they have to be within 3 inches of the unit to buff them, which is like, a lot of people have like 12, 15, 18-inch buffs. You have to be on them, which means you can't even like go on objectives. You can't do anything. You're just like stuck right there with them. On top of that, everything in Cruel Boys does mortal wounds. So like buffing up your ability to crack armor when everything in your army already cracks armor feels like complete overkill. It's like, damn, that 2+ armor save is like, well, literally every unit in my army is good against it. So do I really need to be better against 2+ armor saves? Or do I need to actually kill things? And the answer is you need to actually kill things. And so that's why I don't run Swamp Kala Shamans in any of my Cruel Boys lists.
Yeah, also mathematically, it's just better to have one more unit of 3 guys, right?
Yeah, so 3 Bolt Boys is 120 points. Swamp Kala Shamans, 105. 15 extra points for 3 more Bolt Boys is just better. On units of 9, there's an argument. The math is actually good on units of 9 when you buff them, but then there's the strategic thing of like, do I need this buff? And the answer is no. So it just works out still. You just want Bolt Boys. It's more and more Bolt Boys. They're the only thing that's like truly carrying that book right now, that army. So
and they look great.
Yeah, yeah. And this tournament, all my wins were heavy one-sided, and my loss was a minor to Greg. And Greg's a fantastic player, and I definitely misplayed pretty hard against him and lost myself the game.
Okay, I did too.
Instead of
I
yeah,
had one activation to make, and I didn't make it.
Stabas are the first time you fight Stabas, it's like, oh, this doesn't play the way I thought it would, and then you kind of get that's because that was my first time playing against Stabas. I was like, oh man, I misjudged like several things, and by the time, but Cruel Boys don't have good reactivity. Like you got to commit to a plan, and I was like, well, I'm committed, and now I can't get out of it. I'm going to lose for the rest of the game. Like,
Yep. Also, for me, it was like before the game started, I was like, okay, so what's your movement range the first turn? He's like, I move 8, and then like move 5. So I'm like, oh yeah, so 13. Okay, so 13 inches. We're about, I think it was 13. We were
13,
like
so
18
18
inches apart. Yeah, so we're I thought to myself, okay, 13 minus 18, that's a decent charge. He's not gonna make it. And then he moves up, and I'm like, wait a second, that's a 5-inch charge.
That's a 5-inch. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And I deployed on the line with my screens, and I was
yeah,
like, oh, it makes sense, right? But then it's like, well, I could have just been farther back, and then he wouldn't have been into so many things on turn one. And then I was locked in
yeah,
my deployment with all these big bases, and I was like, no. And then it broke it
yeah.
also. Whatever.
Yeah, I was
Um,
like, I want you here. I want you here. I want you close so I can hit you. And he's like, okay, well, I guess I'll be close. And I'm like,
oh, it's a lot.
that's a lot closer than I thought it would be. Yeah.
True bone split of energy right there. Just like I'm going in no matter what. But yeah, so the tournament overall, like both our lists were clearly good. You also basically got like a minor against Greg, right? Basically, or you lost by like one
Yeah,
point or something like that.
1 point.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was like very close. So basically, both of our lists very nearly went 5-0.
And then it was like a
And
first time thing, like, oh,
yeah,
not gonna happen the second time. I know what's happening now.
yeah, yeah, it's kind of like that with that list. There's certain armies where like Iron Jaws is one of those ones where it's like the first time you play against Iron Jaws, you're gonna get wrecked. Like you're gonna get absolutely demolished. Second time, probably gonna get demolished again. Third time, they're gonna start getting demolished. So it's like, and I think Stab is a little bit like that as well. Where like once you understand on the table how it works, but the first time it's just like, oh my god. All right, so I'm not going to go through all my games, but I am going to just very briefly summarize my games. So people kind of know what happened and some thoughts on it. So round one, I fought KO. Turns out covered in mud, real good. Um, couldn't shoot
-1 to
my.
hit, or can't shoot. Okay, yeah.
Can't be seen if they're in cover, and I put my 2 units of bolt boys, deployed them in cover, rolled my covered in mud. I got 2 choices for covered in mud. It was basically game over right there, because he couldn't do anything.
Right?
Yeah, the entire game, and they just sat there shooting for the entire game, and he couldn't do anything about it. And he killed a lot of my stuff. He tried his best, and the dice were crazy that game, but that was basically the game right there. And then game 2, I fought Cameron on Sylvaneth. He ended up getting third or second place, third place. That guy is really good. And he was playing like fantastically, everything just right. The thing is that Sylvaneth can't do much to my list.
Oh,
They can't hold objectives, and striking and fading sounds cool, except for I've got so many screens and I've got double unleash shell. So you're like, I'm a strike and fade. I'm like, yeah, but you can take 18, 19 mortal wounds on the charge. Doesn't really matter if you fade away, because like you took so much damage on that. And he was playing around that really well, but it restricted his choices. Like he just could. He was like killing hobgrass. Like, I mean, I guess this is what I'm doing now. And he couldn't get objectives, and you can't afford to stand on them against Cruel Boys, because if you stand there, I'm just going to blow you off of them immediately.
Yeah.
So he just lost on primary. He got all his battle tactics. He killed most of my army by the end of the game, but I won by like 10 points. And then round 3, I fought Greg, which I've just talked about. Dabba's got a minor loss there, but it was a super fun game. And I misplayed pretty heavily. Turns out you probably shouldn't charge 9 Bolt Boys into Big Stabas in Wargog range. Probably not the play, in hindsight. And that was a big blowout right there. And so I lost that one. Round 4, I fought Soulblight Gravelords. He didn't kill a single model. It was on the 8 burning objectives thing. He kind of took the mentality. He's like, if I stand back, I'm going to lose. So he went all in, but he didn't make it in with anything. So he made it in with 1 model, and nothing else made it in. And then I shot him with everything I could. Fire Brute walked up, killed the unit, and then I doubled him. And it was just like, okay, well, that's that. Because he was completely out of position, just standing in front of my entire army. He went for the risky play. It was the right play. I think it was the right play, but sometimes in a matchup like that, you just kind of there's nothing you can really do if you get doubled right there.
Yeah. You didn't have the bodies to kind of stop you. Like you didn't have the mass.
No, he was a very elite Soulblight's army. He had like multiple monsters and 10 Blood Knights and which is good against a lot of armies. It's not good against Cruel Boys. I don't care about your 2+ armor save. So.
Do people not just hang outside out of 27 of you the first turn, or does this not matter?
People do. The thing is that I get to decide who goes first. I can deploy very aggressively against armies like that because he just can't make it to me, and I can super sneaky threats into the right positions. So even if he stands back, he's still getting some of his units are gonna get hit. And I'm going to be getting battle tactics and whittling him down for several turns, and eventually I'm going to take 1 step forward and go, all right, now you can't get out of the way. Are you going to try and cross 27 inches in 1 turn? Because you could, but it's probably not going to happen. So it's just better to go for the winning play than to slowly bleed out. And then lastly, I fought Iron Jaws, and that was a really fun game, but the guy knew going in, he's like, I'm going to lose this. There's no way I win this game. He didn't say it at the beginning, and he did play his best. But I was on my Galaxy brain that game. I don't know, I just predicted everything he could possibly do. I played these Iron Jaws a lot. And I also play Orc War Clan, so I was and I won Defender, and I put impassable terrain and buildings and such, so he was just choke points. And I blocked one with the Kron Spine and blocked another with Hobgrots, and then screened off the edges so you can't even double move with more Hobgrots. And then I super sneaky 10 Hobgrots in front of his army, so he couldn't do Mighty Destroyers turn 1. So turn 1 he did nothing. He killed 10 Hobgrots. That was it. Turn 2 I shoved the Kron Spine down his throat. I only charged a War Chant or something like that, but no, he again couldn't do Mighty Destroyers. And there's a Kron Spine there, and I'm shooting him. So he fought the Kron Spine for a bit, and he was like, well, this sucks. Kron Spine was killing shit because he had to get rid of it at some point.
Yeah.
And then he charged another. He tried to charge into my garrison that had my Bolt Boys in it, and I killed him on Overwatch. And then he charged some Hograts. He killed he missed. He didn't roll very good, and he left 1 Hograt alive, so he couldn't even pile into me.
Oh man.
Yeah, and I killed all that, and it was and I doubled him to turn 3, and then it was just tabled. But he did play really well. But that matchup is 80-20 in favor of Cruel Boys. It's just unless I roll terrible.
Assuming that both players know both rules. Actually, I think that is a huge part of.
Definitely, if both players are at the same skill level with that matchup, obviously skill is everything in Age of Sigmar. There's very few matchups like that are always like that, and Cruel Boys are very precise. If you mess up your deployment, word of advice for anyone playing Cruel Boys: spend 20 minutes on your deployment. That is where most of your time should be going, because it's the most important thing. You're not mobile. You have to think through a couple of turns and sit there and be like, is this where I want these models? And ask yourself that several times. Because if you don't, you'll lose. If you do that right, you have a pretty good chance to Cruel Boys. But yeah, that was pretty much how the tournament went. Super fun. Every game I had, great players, super friendly, great energy. Everyone lost super graciously. I lost graciously as well when I lost to Greg. So yeah, great environment, great tournament. you want to briefly go over kind of what you thought
Yeah,
in
sure.
summaries?
I'm glad you had fun. No more conceding, Aaron. It's long Aaron of the
Hey, all right.
past.
I learned my lesson. I'm no
Yeah,
longer Scoops. I'm now the Stallion, apparently.
that was Stallion. Aaron the Stallion. But
Yeah.
I mean, like, notice especially that you have like top fived almost every time since then, since you stopped
Ever since I
scooping.
stopped scooping, yeah, it's like 4-1, 4-1, 5-0, 4-1. Like apparently it's not magic, and you can actually come back from a loss. Who knew?
Yeah,
Um,
that's biggest takeaway from your journey is the fact that it's not 40k. You can always win even at the end of the game.
yeah,
It was a great game. Like, I think Honest Wargamer was talking about it in that video the other day, where he was like, none of the top 10 lists were repeats. Um,
yeah,
I had a friend who was coming back in the game. And they're like, "Hey, Kyle, so what's the meta like right now?" And I'm like, "I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. I've been to every tournament almost. Like it's something different every single time.
the
Sometimes
meta
I
is
see nothing but
Plague.
Nurgle. Sometimes nothing but Sylvaneth. And so, um, a summary of like some of the big takeaways I've realized is that taking no plays for the week is maybe not a great idea anymore, especially if you don't have a lot of shooting, because Sylvaneth exists. And when Sylvaneth exists and you can't run down those teleporting tree revenants that are sitting in the back of the board, and like I actually almost failed my grand strategy 3 times, but my
Damn.
opponents conceded before we actually like got to rolling it. So I was like, well, uh, realistically, I'm probably not going to kill them. But if you want to, you want to concede, I guess, like I'll take it. Um,
Yeah,
that's part of the reason why I was actually scoring so low on like especially like the first 3 games because I had Sylvaneth the first mod games 1 and 3. So
mm,
um, going back to going through it, first game I had Sylvaneth, which was the Tree Lords. Turns out that 3-up saves pretty good, especially when you don't bracket, and then you fail your charge to reduce the saves. And, like those things are just kind of sticking around. 1 second, the
yeah,
cop's going by. And then game 2 was against Marathi and the Bow Snakes, which is something that will continue to be in the meta, but like gets better and worse as time goes on. Um, Turns out that Night Haunt hero spam doesn't really care too much if you have shooting because like what are you going to shoot? If they
yeah,
go, I find that as important as it is to kill things like Kurdos or my healing pieces, if they don't shoot the chain rasps, then they're not scoring primary. Like any time that somebody
yeah,
has half of their army in shooting, and they're up against Eternal Expert Conquerors. I mean, I don't know if you had this problem because I guess you just shot all your opponents off, but like if you're not scoring primary, you're not scoring primary, right? And you're like, okay, well then what do I shoot? Um,
yeah,
and then the other thing is like when you're pointing that many shots at something, you're probably gonna overkill it when it's uh
little character, yeah,
yeah, and I get to choose whether or not they overkill it. Like so it's like, oh, do I want to pass the saves off to a spirit host is it worth it for me just to have the unit die, So a lot of interesting stuff there with Night Haunt and just shooting. I continue to realize. Um, Game 3 again was Sylvaneth, but on head-to-head, head-on collision. And
yeah,
Sylvaneth on head-on collision against, um, something that has Expert Conqueror sitting on the center objective and then enough bodies in the back to stop them from deploying behind means that
yeah,
my opponent just never scored primary. Like,
yeah.
he
That's kind of the
played
thing about Sylvaneth,
perfectly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
Sylvaneth is like interesting because like it's an incredibly powerful book, and you look at it and you're like, wow, this is like a broken book. But when you actually play on the tabletop, yeah, some of the abilities feel broken, but the truth is that like for them to win the game, they basically have to table you. Um, and they have the capacity to do so if they play really well, roll pretty good, stuff like that. But there's so many fail points that like their powerful army actually feels very balanced.
yeah.
And it's armies like you, it's I mean that's a tough cookie. Like I would hate to be the Sylvaneth player sitting across from your army because it's like, oh, my damage 3 sides. You're like, you mean damage 1 size? Like rend 3, you mean no rend?
Yeah.
I'm going to stand on this objective, and you're not going to stand on this objective. And it's a hard place to be.
Pretty much exactly what happened. Like, at one point he committed Durthu because he had to, or else he just would never score. And then Durthu was standing there, and then turns out that when I return a model to take the objective back, means he doesn't score primary. You know, like,
Yeah.
it was like, yeah, if you know how to play, I own Sylvanet. This is again where like the biggest way to be really good at this game is to lose the game with a bunch of different armies. Like,
Yeah. You're like, oh, so that's how you beat this army. I see.
yeah,
That felt bad. Yeah.
So, I mean, like, it was really hard not to have the Unga Bunga brain to go, oh, I just want to go over and, like, and kill him. I was like, yeah, so for the first 3 battle rounds, 4 models had died. 2 of which were Dryads and 2 of them were
Oh my God.
Yes, you know, like I just was like, I can't go into you. But I also, there's no reason for me to, because you're gonna lose if you don't come in, right? As he'd come in, he'd kill like 4 chain rasp and bounce back, and then I would return them.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, like unfortunately, that's
Yeah.
the extent of what's gonna happen here.
Yeah,
Because
it's
if he
pretty
stays, then Kurdos kills him,
slow.
right? So,
Yeah, your list is definitely not for the impatient player. Let's just put it
yeah,
that way.
yeah.
So,
But it is important to remember that sometimes you can win games just from standing around.
just from to doing nothing. Yeah, that's my list does that a lot. I'm just like, we can stand here if you want. I don't have to do anything really. So how'd your round 4 go?
Round 4 was against Bone Splitters. So turns out that
Right.
when you have reduced damage by 1 and then ignore Ren 2, you know, and then the Bone Splitters are coming in with their 4 attacks each and hitting on 4s and 4s because of I put all my dudes in a garrison, and so I had -1 to hit, -1 to save. Sorry, -1 to hit, -1 to wound, no rend, -1 damage, and I was
Oh
passing off
man,
wounds back to the spirit hosts who were sitting behind the big garrison.
I do remember I had finished my game and I walked over and you guys were at like bottom of 1 because it's just rolling like endless piles of dice back and forth doing nothing to each other.
Yeah.
I was just like, my God, this is. It was pretty funny though.
But I had, yeah,
Yeah,
it was definitely in my favor. I just deployed terrible. Like, this is again like the sleepy brain 3 hour sleep. I
yeah,
realized I put one hero on the wrong side of the board. I put him back in the sky, and then didn't take first turn for some reason, and then put him. You know, it was like I forgot my Emerald Host completely, so I didn't even use my subfaction ability.
oh
Um,
man,
Activating the wrong orders. It was just like I was winning the game, I was winning the dice rolls, but I was just like I was playing terribly, and I was like at the end of it, I'm like, you know what? I probably shouldn't go into game 5. This is pretty bad, you know. Like,
yeah.
uh,
It turns out that going out drinking and dancing until 3 in the morning, after playing for 10 hours and then going out 4 hours of sleep to try and play day 2 of a tournament, not a recipe for success. But we did pretty well anyway because
we did, yeah. And then game 5. The most important thing to talk about. I mean, it was Seraphon. Turns out 2 Banshees stops Croak from doing anything. I mean, Croak does nothing. It's a sad Seraphon boy. I unbound every single spell that he cast, except for like 1 combat call at the end of the game. Like 3 Celestial Deliverances in a row. After sitting next to him, like, yeah, like you go into 10 inches of Croak, it's Death Zone. Like on
yeah.
Banshees, right? So,
Oh man, I didn't even think about that. That is gross. That's like exactly what the Vermont Banshees are for, though, right? That's why they're
yeah.
so good in this meta.
So
yeah,
that was perfect. But like the thing that I realized is on Nidus Paths, if you measure out the maximum distance that you can go from like, you know, your deployment, like say that, you know, the 15 from the side is here, and then you're like on that 15 line, 9 inches from that corner objective to the far right. 6 inches off of that that corner, is that the spot where you can jump over, right? So
Yeah.
if I had half of my army, or really it's like 300 points of my army at the bottom there, and then most of the rest of my army is at the top, the other side corner. All I need to do is measure the distance from the maximum run from a character to that corner Nidus path. Then I can run on my turn all the way over, pop in through the thing, and then at the end of the movement phase, jump over, and now I'm on the rest of the side with the rest of my army. So
Oh, so you can basically transfer them back and forth as long as you have like that max distance. So you can take up a lot of board space to be able to shoot back, teleport to wherever you need them to be. Basically, what you're saying.
yeah. Like I put my 10 blade guys and 2 heroes there in the corner, right? And that's enough, like, scary amount of stuff. I got like 10 blade. Everyone looks at blade guys now because they're scary and go, okay, I need to kill that, right? But also 10 blade guys is only 180 points or 75 points. I don't actually care if
Yeah.
they die. So this guy puts his Distillodon and 2 Stegodons like right against that, right? I'm like, okay, well I don't want to fight that. So he kills all my blade guys. I run my spirit torment all the way over to the corner to try and have him hop over. I was 1 inch off. If I had measured that perfectly, he could have jumped to the other side. But like I
Yeah, and
had
then you and then,
realized
you,
that,
then he's
uh,
overcommitted these slow units to a corner, and you're like outmaneuvering him like crazy right there.
yeah,
That's
and then
actually
I'm
really.
proving ground. Yeah, like so
Oh,
even if he takes it now, it's like okay, well,
you can't
it's a
even take
shame.
it. Yeah, that's gross, dude. That's that big brain shit right there. Galaxy brain over here. 10 steps
So
ahead.
that so I control 2 objectives. He controls 1. Um, and I have left my home objective completely. And by the time he gets there, proving ground, like okay, well now you can't take my home objective. I'm on that objective.
Oh,
I survived with 1 chain rasp, rallied it, have it jump back through the Nidus path on the other side, and then ran it onto the objective. And like he had a Stegodon there and some dudes, but like the chain rasp
extra
count as
conquerors.
15, right? Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
I just needed to have the opportunity to do that.
I think
So
that's a lesson right there for a lot of players is to remember that like it's a game based on points, and even like you don't necessarily have to kill your opponent's army. It's cool when you do, but like you could just do stuff like that. You're just like, well, I have one more body in this objective than you. I'm just going to stand here and I'm winning on points. And yeah, you're going to kill them, but if I charge them, they're going to die anyway. So I'm just not going to. And playing that little sort of passive game when you need to and knowing when to do that, I think is a big deal. So it's something to think about a lot if you're struggling in missions. Is like think about, do I really need to charge right now? Stuff like that. And I think that's a big thing in your list. Is that raw survivability. Buying time to regenerate models is like every turn they're not hitting you is another turn of your inevitability. So,
exactly.
yeah,
Man, the important thing about the Nidus Path is that it is at the end of the movement phase, so you can actually move into it. Like you can run
yeah,
your full movement. Like if you move 12 and you run 6 and you go on 18 inches and then you just pop through there and you're on the other side, nobody sees that coming. Like I'm not
yeah.
gonna
It's
plan for you moving 18 to
four
get to
inches
the
from
other
the
side of
corner.
the
You're
board.
damn near in the center of the table, and you're just like, just kidding.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
pretty
it's
interesting.
it only matters for the 2 that you don't start on. But like if you plan for that specifically, then you can kind of like go, okay, well that one that you have, I don't care about that one because you're
Yeah,
not going to score any points on it. I
unless
don't even
they
have to
don't
stand there.
bother to screen it. Yeah,
Yeah,
unless they don't bother screening, but they probably will. Um, Especially if you're playing round 5. But yeah. So I think that overall, I think the tournament was awesome. Both our lists were pretty great. Everybody who played was having a great time. Um, really love the community out there. Uh, People know how to have a laugh while also being super competitive, which I think is the right combo, especially for Age of Sigmar. Like, have fun, play your best, but also have fun doing so. Um, and yeah, So what does it say? I think that pretty much covers a lot of what we need to talk about. Is there anything specific that you would like to talk about other than lists and matchups and stuff like that? Like, for example, shoutouts, upcoming events, things like that.
uh I feel like you should do that. I don't. I'm
Sure.
still kind of recovering from the last one, and then
Yeah.
like you're looking at
Okay.
the shoot, we have a lot of events coming up. It's like
Yeah. There's a lot of events coming up. So first off, I would like to shout out Cameron, the Silver Death player that I fought round 2, who ended up getting third place. I got fourth. Fantastic player. Really interesting games, and I watched several of his games playing other people. That guy is a beast. And I expect to see him up in like the 4150s a lot in various tournaments. So watch out for him. And also James, the TO for Arizona GT. He's no longer going to be in Arizona, but he's been throwing great events for a long time. Super fun time. Really nice guy. So I just wanted to give him a little thank you for throwing the events. Upcoming next week, I'm going to Frontline Gaming Teams tournament. You might be going. It's still a little iffy, maybe.
I
But
said
we're
I signed up for it today, so I'm going.
okay. All right, cool. So we're both going to teams tournament. We got 2 SoCal teams going. It's a fairly small event, but it's a very competitive event. We got Team America playing, and like a lot of good teams there. So it should be a blast, and we'll have another. We'll talk about it soonish, and then there's SoCal Open coming up. That's another big frontline gaming event, probably the biggest frontline gaming event on the West Coast, I think, for AOS. So
LVO, not
we're both.
Frontline Gaming.
Oh, LVO. Sorry, I forgot about LVO. Yeah. Well, obviously that was the biggest ever. Talking about like it's also on the coast though, not really.
Ah,
Vegas is
the
in the
West
middle of the
Coast.
damn desert.
It's on the west side of the country.
Yeah, I guess so. Western half. Um, so SoCal Open's pretty big, and then also I would like to talk about Old Town Throwdown teams. December 1st, I think, or 2nd. We're having a big team tournament. We already got a lot of signups. We got a lot of people looking for groups. If you guys are like open, available, interested, just join our Discord. Check it out. Poke around, see if anyone wants to be on a team with you. Team events are super fun. They're way more fun than singles tournaments are fun, but team events are a blast. It's a whole different game. You never like you never get that bad feel of like, oh, I'm in a losing matchup because then you're playing for your team. You're not playing to win your game. You're like playing to like help out your team, get some extra points, throw it towards them. Like, and there's this teamwork element going on and the camaraderie and stuff like that is super fun. So check that out. It's on oldtownthrowdown.com, or you can check out the Twitter or the Twitch, obviously, and stuff. We'll be sure to help you out with that. So definitely look into that if you like teams events. Other than that, I think it's about all that I got here. So I'm ready to wrap up.
We gotta shout out to Colt. Gotta be like, hey man,
Oh, Colt,
come back for you.
the SoCal Slayer. That dude. Oh my god! Every time we go to Arizona, that dude just like crushes our dreams. He's he's a real good player. He needs to show up to more events.
He said he was coming to a few over here, but like it is funny.
Oh
It's
hell
just
yeah,
like every SoCal player he's played against, he's won. So it's like, okay,
yeah,
Colt, I guess we're coming for you.
yeah. He's out with a vengeance. He's trying to earn back some honor for Arizona. He's really good though. He's a super nice guy. Um, yeah. Anything else? I think that's.
I will
I think
also
that's it.
say though that I did love all my opponents. So if any of you are listening, you guys were great.
Yeah. All right, so yeah, I think that's about it. If you guys see me at an event, say "wasada," and I'll say it right back. Always a friendly guy, So I love to help people out. So feel free to hit me up on Discord or Twitter if you have questions. I love giving advice and teaching people things. So, yeah.
Same.
With that, adios.
There you go.